Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. Now that we've had some time to rest and compose ourselves and take a good look at what happened, I think it's time we revisit the pandemic. We did see humanity at its best and its worst. When things were first starting up, a lot of people panicked and they started doing crazy things like not wanting to touch envelopes, not wanting to, receive pizza because anybody could be a carrier. Even though you don't know a single person, there was that fear and distrust between fellow human beings. Now, why was that? Well, the truth is because communication simply wasn't there. Nobody was explaining things, and even things they would explain, they would later unexplain. Remember when we were told that this came from a bat somebody had bought in a food market in Wuhan province in China? And then they turned around and said, nope, this didn't come from China because the Chinese government said it didn't come from China. Making people twist around and go, a minute ago you said one thing and now you're saying another thing. And this is where the conspiracy theorists make their money. We still don't really know the patient zero, the first case that gave rise to everything else. There's still debate over it, and it's still heavily politically influenced debate. What we do know is people went wild. First of all, they were told to go home. Well, even during the dirtiest, dangerous, darkest days of the Cold War, they didn't shut anybody down. Yep, go to the factories, keep working until the alarms go off, and then keep working because you're going to duck and cover and survive this stuff. Yes, this is how things were. Now, the primary plan of the government to isolate everybody for a few weeks and let the thing burn out was actually a good idea. Judging by the life cycle of this, you could have made it work. Most countries do have a reserve of food and supplies in store. The United States still has a strategic cheese reserve, and most militaries have enough MREs to go around. It's one of the places they do spend their money is making sure they have food. Because, as Napoleon said, an army marches on its stomach. So if you had to, you could take a few weeks, distribute MREs. It's not that hard. There's enough bases and, armories and stuff like that. You can do a simple distribution system where your guys and girls are going out. Sorry. And scarily enough, I served with the first generation of female frontline combat soldiers who were all excellent. So that's really wrong of me. But you can have them going door to door, handing them a 2-3 week supply or a 1 week supply with the promise that they'll be back later. This could have been executed. Now you're of course going to get a few nuts, and we had them, that are not going to listen to anybody or anything. My freedoms say that I get to do this. Normally. There's always a point where your freedom is no longer a freedom. The pandemic was one example. And, if you're trespassing on somebody else's property, you do have the freedom to move around, but that's that person's private property. My right, I'm looking exactly at the fence that separates myself from my next door neighbor, and my freedoms end as soon as I cross that line. I can't do what I want, I have to ask their permission. but there wasn't really an authority in charge. There were talking heads, you know, radio and TV personalities from all sorts of distinct societies. And a few of them were conspiracy realists, if you want to give them the title that they prefer themselves, but they were equally as uninformed as the rest of us. So, when you have bad information being fed, when you have a certain percentage of the population that is not interested in conforming to what everybody else is doing, and some die-hard people that don't realize that we live in a society, you're in for a lot of trouble. Now, if I can tell you precisely, don't go to the city hall because, you know, um, nuclear waste was dumped there by accident and it's going to take us 6 weeks to clean it up. Most people understand, hey, toxic stuff. It's a restricted area that I'm supposed to be able to go to and get my marriage certificate and birth certificate and stuff like that. But for the next couple of weeks, it's a bad idea to do it. A disease, a pandemic, is invisible. It's not something you can see. It's not like a Soviet T-72 tank pulling into my driveway. Yes, I know it's bad. There's no reason for that T-72 to be here, and I have people to call that can deal with that problem. When it's invisible and anybody could be infected, because it was true, we still are depending on those rapid antigen tests, and we still have to go after that to go and get a proper blood draw so they can figure out what's going on. It's kind of like cancer. Cancer is the invisible killer. You see the person deteriorate, but there's no obvious cause. There's no stab wound. There's no bullet wound. It's something that our brains find very difficult to deal with. The government's nebulous and uncoordinated response was pretty much what cost us. We could have eradicated the pandemic very early on if the NATO nations got together. The world got together and said, okay, these 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, we're going to tighten the belt. We're going to do what we have to, but we're going to make sure, nobody's getting out and about, and we're going to send the right people home if they're essential workers, if they get a positive rapid antigen test. That could have happened. They got a United Nations Assembly. It would have been pretty easy to put that together. But it didn't happen. And if you recall, it was in, March of 2020 where things started to get particularly bad, when they started shutting people down. Now, the essential services, I know that a lot of that stuff could have been done from home. But no, they kept letting the people come to the office because the managers still want to strut around and say, oh, these people report to me. And that's the attitude. Oh, my workers need to be here. Unfortunately, that's simply no longer the case. In 2024, we have better infrastructure than ever, and people can work from home. So when I say this was a shutdown, it still would have been possible to keep people rolling. You give them a couple $1,000s, which was basically the benefit that was given out anyways. You give them, like I said, proper rations. If they don't like them, there's a little bit of variety in there. Nobody ever liked the beans and weenies one, but you'd be able to accommodate them to a certain respect because, the beans and weenie is pork, but make sure that doesn't go to a Muslim or a Jewish person, and you're pretty much golden. Or in a blended house like my own, we'll just trade and swap between ourselves. But because of the lack of information, lack of coordination, and lack of determination, we wound up with a 1.5-year pandemic that's now a regular part of life. Everybody gets it now. and we're never going to get rid of it. So it was an absolute failure of an exercise, precisely because people were too busy not communicating to develop a cohesive strategy, to inform the public and not have them panic buy, and give people accurate information. We are humans. We can be so intelligent. We can send people to the moon, or at least we once could. We're building nuclear reactors. We got the internet. We got so many fantastic things going on. But we're also humans. We're animals. We're creatures on the savannah that knew one on one we can't defeat a lion. But we invented the spear and the bow and all sorts of ways to mitigate that power difference. And while we couldn't necessarily defeat a lion, we could make it think twice before thinking humans are easy prey. But when we don't know what something is, we revert to that tribal mentality of sitting around a fire, hearing something move in a distance and trying to figure out, is that something we need to be afraid of? Is that something... It's that fundamental in our evolutionary process. Millions of years old. It's been an effective survival strategy. So when you don't give people information, they imagine what they're going to. They take their experience and apply it. Oh, a disease. I don't want a disease. I I know I should keep away from people that are coughing and sneezing, but apparently this thing spreads without that. So what do I do? Well, now I've got to burn some incense to clear the air. I gotta humidify so that way it weighs the virus down. People are very creative when you give them a chance. Are they effective? No, but they're very creative. So the secret, anything in the future that may come up again, and there's always something that can come up. You might remember the bird flu, you might remember the swine flu both times. Actually, the bird flu I think came up twice as well. And people get very nervous about it. So communication has to be at the core of our survival strategy if we are to continue as the human race. Because despite the fact that laissez-faire economics is supposed to be the ultimate with the invisible hand moderating everything, we can see from the pandemic that didn't happen because nobody had the information to figure out what was going on. The invisible hand failed. The invisible virus went wild. With that, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please like, share, because sharing is caring. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Don't forget to click the icon to get an update every time we release a new show. We hope you have a fantastic day.